Feeling stuck or unfulfilled? Searching for more meaning in your work and life? Wondering what's next? You're not alone, and you're in the right place. This is Focus on Why, the podcast that turns reflection into action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and each week I dive deep with guests who've chosen to live and work with purpose. Together we explore what drives them, shapes their decisions, and gives their life meaning. Through real stories and honest conversations, you'll discover how to gain clarity, make confident choices, and create a life that truly matters. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, have you read my book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life? It's an uplifting guide to living with purpose, clarity, and meaning, and it's co-authored with my late grandfather. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, all the links you need to purchase your copy today are in the show notes. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Dave James. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well. What is it you're focusing on right now?
That's a very good question. So there's two things that I am focusing on in my world at the moment. The one is how I get better at helping my speaker clients to be able to go on stage and connect with audiences and share all the good stuff that they know and help audiences transform. And the second is how I change my thoughts around happiness and how that alters my How to Be a Happy Human keynote.
Oh, which one should we go with? Whoa. First, because we can go into. I'm going to ask the question: what are you wanting audiences to transform into or from?
Every time anyone stands up and speaks in front of an audience, there has to be some form of change. There has to be a transformation. And I talk with clients we talk about stories a lot, and stories require a character, a setting, a plot, but they also require conflict. And the one bit in the mix which I think a lot of people miss is they miss that element of transformation. And in the work that I do and being around the speaking world for a few years, you see a lot of people who inspire, where people go, "Oh, that was amazing! You've done wonderful things. You've climbed Everest in your underpants, and that's brilliant." But then no one feels really connected to it. And so for me, the transformation is about how you, as a speaker, with your subject and your knowledge, how you can offer that to an audience as an invitation, and then they can actually do something with it. Because a lot of people, in my experience, and I've just come back from as you record this, from a conference in Glasgow, they listen to a lot of stuff, they take a lot of notes, but then nothing really changes when they go back to work a few days later. And for me, it's about how can we, as speakers, how can we really be clear on what it is that we want audiences to take away? And there always has to be a change.
And you said it's an invitation. So it is an invitation. It's not an imperative. It's not you must. It's an opportunity. What compels the audience to take that action?
Oh, Lacey, that's a really good question. And I wonder sometimes when audiences come along and listen to speakers, whether they're doing it because they choose to or whether they're doing it because they're obliged to. And yeah, the conference I've just been to is a professional conference in the podiatry world, and there'll be a lot of people who will be going there not because they want to listen to speakers, but because they need to tick a box of CPD. So there's definitely got to be an intention from the individual, and this is where the title or the promise of a speech has to be very clear. People have to know what they're getting from it, and it also has to match up with them being ready to want to make that change.
So we've got an invitation, potentially an obligation, this intention, this promise, this
Mhm.
inspirational piece that can happen as a result of one speech. And then you coupled earlier your two things of how you can get your clients to become better at all of this, linked to how you are also altering your own keynote based on how you can change your thoughts. So explain how they are interconnected, if they are at all.
It's again a brilliant question, because they are interconnected. Yet I sometimes struggle to articulate that interconnection, and I'm thinking about that from I suppose from the space of marketing is how do we go and market the services we have when they look like they're two very different things. But if I think about the speaker coaching is about enabling people to be able to go and share what is beautiful about them to the world. And I have on my wall in the office here, I have a manifesto which basically says it's not about making you look like some cliched speaker. It's about you being you, but amplified and in a way which people can see and connect with. The happiness work is as much about being seen and being heard and being brave enough to go out there and say, what is it that makes me happy? And I will give a little spoiler alert here for my keynote, just in case anyone's listening to this and going, I want to book Dave to come and talk about this, is it's not about happiness, or it's not purely about happiness. Happiness is one tiny part of the puzzle, but it is the thing which people get drawn into. So they are connected because there's a lot of themes which run through all of them, and probably the biggest one is authenticity. And I know people use the word authenticity a lot, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what authenticity is, but we throw it around because it's a beautiful Instagram quote. But being authentic as a speaker helps you to connect with your audience. Being authentic as a human being helps you to be happier. So there are elements of connection in there, and for me it's about being seen and heard and validated, and both of those things do that in maybe similar ways, but there are definitely differences as well.
Often, Dave, when I have a guest on, their focus is in an area that they want to learn more about themselves. It's quite self-indulgent in a good way. This is how purpose starts, because there is some kind of genuine connection to the pursuit of this.
Yeah.
How did happiness, or not even happiness, authenticity, connection, how did that be what it is you're in pursuit of?
It's really interesting. It's hard to look forward on these things and go, in 5 years' time, I'll be talking about this. It doesn't happen. When you look back, you go, ah, that's what it was. And there are there are various milestones for me. There are particularly around authenticity. There are milestones around me suddenly realizing that I don't have to mask or hide or pretend to be someone else, particularly in some of the professional spaces that I've been in. There's the moment during therapy a couple of years ago where I had this moment of realization when my therapist was asking me some great questions, and she looked at me and said, what's happened? And I said, I just realized I'm not happy. And I talk about this in my keynote because that's a really annoying thing when you've got a keynote called How to Be a Happy Human to find out you're not happy. And that sent me on that little quest to understand more about happiness. But it all comes back to, I suppose, me wanting to connect with me ultimately and understand me more and understand why things have happened around me or with me or for me or to me over the years. And that the How to Be a Happy Human keynote was born out of a really big reflection on pausing, and a really big reflection on the gap between stimulus and response, which it was ultimately the work of Viktor Frankl. But it was a really big thing for me, which changed a lot for me 10 years ago, back in 2015, where I suddenly realized that when things happened around me, I didn't have to go to a predefined outcome, which for me at the time was anger. There was this space which you could crawl into, and even as a bloke of 6'2" and significantly more than 15 stone at the moment, I can crawl into that space and I can make it whatever I want it to be, that the stimulus didn't require it to be a reaction, it could be a response. And so the happiness stuff built out of that, because I started to look at the pillars or the components of what really helps us to be, I suppose, happier, but also more content, and also have the space to experience everything that life has to, the grand things that life has to offer, and sometimes the less than grand things.
And with this research that you've been doing over the last 10 years, what realizations have you had along that journey?
Oh, there's so many things. The use of mindfulness was a surprising one. The idea that you can sit there and focus on your thoughts will have such power. That's still that still surprises me even now. The the last 10 years has had some big realizations. I've been through a separation and currently going through a divorce. There's been a lot of changes around that. I've not been around my kids as much as I would like, and I went from being a professional in podiatry, so running my own clinic, to doing the work that I do now around coaching. So there's been a lot of changes, and perhaps a lot of the realizations are still waiting to appear. But also, I know I'm in a better place to receive those. And I always say to people when I talk about separation and divorce that if I'd have gone through this process of separation and divorce before 2015, it would have been a very different picture. So well, I suppose one of the big realizations for me is that change is also possible. And I'd say that, and my brain just goes, Dave, that's a bit cheesy, but it is that we have this ability to make decisions and to make changes in our life which result in a very different outcome. And while there's lots of things which are outside of our control and perhaps not our fault, there is so much which is in our control and so much which we can influence.
And one of the things that you just said was that it was in hindsight, with hindsight, in retrospect, that you can go back and see the clear moments where the direction has shifted and things have happened. You can also assign meaning to every moment, and that can be different depending on the moment that you're thinking about that particular event, and it can change. So you can have the same event, which can mean many things over time. In this moment right now, you can choose to be angry, happy. It is about choice, right?
Mm.
So knowing that you have a choice of what you can and can't control, and that you have chosen these two areas, why those?
Oh, and again, a brilliant question. I don't future pace very well. So if you said to me, Dave, in 5 years' time, what will you be doing? I'm like, I have no idea at all. It seemed like the right thing to do. And, and I remember in 2018, I was being coached, and my coach at the time, Chris, asked me a question. He said, what is it you want to do? And I said, I want to do more coaching. And he said, how can you do that? And I went, well, I was working in my podiatry practice. I can either get more associates in to do the work so I can take more time away from it, or I could sell my practice. And selling my practice had never been on the radar. And suddenly in that moment, it just appeared. And I put my practice up for sale the end of the day because it felt so right, and sold it about 5 months later. But that future pacing thing for me I've always found that really hard. It's always felt like, well, that seems like it's the right thing to do. And the evolution of, from Power of the Pause I did 3 years ago as a showcase in the Professional Speaking Association, right the way through to How to Be a Happy Human. There's been an evolution in that, and it's almost like I've just pulled on that thread and gone, oh, that's really interesting. Well, actually, I'm calling, I maybe talk about authenticity, but am I really talking about authenticity, or am I talking about intentional authenticity, and why is that different? And then there was the realization with the speaker coaching that I was I was speaking, I was loving speaking, I was getting really geeky on my speaking because I wanted to get that connection, and ultimately it was in service of, I want more clients. That's it was a business decision. But then realized I was working on one side. I was getting really geeky about speaking to get better at my speaking, to then come across to the other side to get clients to come and work with me as a business and life coach. And I thought, why am I doing that? Some of the most beautiful conversations I've had with people over the 6 months before have been where they've said to me, "Well, I see you're speaking. Can you talk to me more about that?" And I found that I really enjoyed it. And I went, "Well, why don't I just bring all this together and just coach people around the thing which I love to do?" Everything has been, that seems like a really good idea. And perhaps if I could maybe future pace it a little bit more, maybe I'd be able to plan it and go, well, maybe that would be a really good idea, instead of suddenly waking up one morning and going, oh, bugger, that's what I'm meant to be doing. And there's a real, there is a frustration in that, because I don't do structure. but I do frameworks. But sometimes I have to build the framework from within. I can't build it from outside and then apply it. And it shifts and it changes. And while that's exciting, it's also a pain in the backside.
What's the difference for you between structure and framework?
Structure I will always try and break. It feels too rigid. It feels like it's imposed, and to step away from it would be wrong. Whereas a framework, it has flexibility. It's that there's enough things there, there's enough landmarks there, and there's enough waypoints there that I know which direction I'm going in. But what happens in between those spaces could be anything. And I think about that in terms of speaking. It's I know that I've got to get from point A to point B. It's just and then there's going to be A1, A2, A3 in the middle, but there might be things which happen in the space I'm in, or have happened that day, or have happened to me recently, or a thought which pops in, which I might want to share as part of that, and I want the freedom to be able to do that. A structure doesn't do that, and I've watched speakers who memorize their speeches exactly, and there's no connection. There's no presence, and I find that a real shame because we're part of one of the honors of being a speaker is you have an audience. You have an audience that you get to connect with. And if you're memorizing a speech and just delivering words in a particular order and it has to be exact, you don't need the audience there. And that seems a bit silly.
Yeah, I hear you. And so this freedom of having the framework, which allows you to move and adapt. And as you say, it's got landmarks, waypoints, flexibility, as opposed to this rigid, imposed, self imposed, even if it
Hmm.
can be structure, which feels very static and immovable. So I hear the difference between the two. You mentioned freedom. What does freedom mean for you, Dave?
It's one of my three values. So I have fun, freedom, and fairness. Fairness, I'm still working out, I know when things don't feel fair either to me or other people, and I'll try and do something about that. Fun is the one which, if I'm not having fun, then I tend not to do it. I become mischievous, and that's when I try and break the structures. Freedom is, for me, it does come down to that choice. It's the choice of who I spend time with. It's the choice of what I get to do with that time. And somebody asked me recently, I said, if if your business was exactly what it wanted to be, what would you be doing differently to what you're doing now? And the answer is, well, I'd have more money to count. That'd be the only difference. But other than that, I get to do things which I really enjoy. I get the freedom to, last week I was in Wales and Glasgow, some of it with my coach, some of it speaking. The weekend got the chance to sit, as we talked about before we started recording, to binge watch The Witcher. It was that freedom to do things, but also to have conversations like this. It's that element of freedom to read the books I want to read, to watch the TV I want to read, to cook the food I want to read, to do it with the people I want to be around, and to not be so forced by the stuff which is going on in the outside world. I know that when I worked for the NHS up until 2015, one of the reasons for me leaving the NHS was because the NHS and me, we became very different in our values and our approach, and I didn't have the freedom to do my job to help the people I was there to serve. And that for me was a big red flag, and I couldn't stay there because of it, and I dropped my main income source because of it, because it for me it wasn't fair, and it didn't offer me the freedom I wanted, and I wasn't having fun anymore. Freedom is choice, but for me it's very much a felt thing. And again, very, very hard in some ways for me to describe. But I know when I've got it, and my body and brain tell me when I haven't, because that's when I try and break things and start to, and I start to, maybe it's the self-imposed structure. When I'm not having freedom, it's because I've turned a framework into a structure.
Yeah, I love the interconnection between the fun, the freedom, and the fairness. And I was just thinking earlier when you mentioned that there was this predominance of anger, that it
Mm.
was probably, well, I'll ask the question, was it conflicting your values? And if so, which one?
And again, brilliant question, and it's interesting because the work now, I talk about anger a lot as part of my keynotes, and it's a story I share quite often, and it comes from being thrown out of the house by my ex 10 years ago. That was the catalyst which made me go, right, I need to sort out who I am, and I need to have a better relationship with my emotions. And one of the things which has become quite interesting and quite surprising is I ask myself, how many times have I truly been angry in my life? Despite the fact that I talk about anger and I've got all of these reference points for being angry, how many of them were really angry? How many of it was something else going on? How many of it was a conflict with my freedom? How many of it was where I didn't see fairness, yet I didn't have the language to explain it? And how many times was I just not having fun, and actually being angry was a great way of not necessarily having fun, but it was shaking things up a little bit. And I honestly, at this point, I kind of like, if I take my two hands and I count on my fingers and my thumbs, I'm not sure I could count that there's 10 times that I've been truly angry in my life. A lot of it will have been frustration or amusement or fear or or not being seen and not being heard and validated, all of those things, and not having the skills in place to be able to manage that emotional load, not being able to filter out the world. And coming back to the freedom part is, one of the things I don't do is I don't watch news. I keep away from the news as much as possible because I know how much it affects me. So, how many times was my anger expressed, or that feeling of anger, because I wasn't able to process what was going on around me?
Can you remember a particular news item where the anger came out?
Oh, I have to say that I definitely get frustration now because I live very close to my mum and dad, and my dad is an avid watcher of the news, and he will ask me questions. He'll say, "Have you seen this?" And I'll go, "No," and then he'll tell me about it, and I find myself getting really frustrated, particularly when it comes. I mean, me and my dad. My dad is in all of my 52 years, he's a knight in shining armor. He's been the one there who has almost like plucked me out of situations and given me the space to do stuff. He's been amazing, and I'm so grateful to him for that. But there's probably only a couple of things we disagree on, and one of them is politics. And that's where I have to be very careful. I don't go full tilt into those modes, and it tends to be political news which throws me, because it's that disconnection from real people. And so it's those news stories which absolutely throw me, because I don't understand it. And it may be it's a lack of understanding of my part, which is the frustration, or maybe that I'm seeing something and other people aren't. I don't know, but it tends to be the politics stuff which throws me.
There's an exercise that I have in my book in Focus on Why, which is to help you to elicit your own values. One of the things is to tune into watching the news, purely because it does provoke these really strong emotional reactions with the topics or issues that are coming up, and those emotions and subsequent feelings provide really valuable information, clues to the meanings behind what really drives you. And so the reason I'm thinking is that clearly fairness being one of your core values has gets compromised a lot when you watch it.
I just I know that I'm not going to be the person who's ever going to get involved with this, and I would make a terrible leader of, prime minister or leader of anything. But you see that disconnection, and it becomes
Mhm.
frustrating. And having worked in, A&E as a nurse, and seeing people who are properly at rock bottom, having worked with the homeless as a podiatrist, and seeing people who are at the very pointy end of the systems that we create. And I'm really lucky. I'm living in the Western world as a white man, and I could do with more money. I mean, I think most of us could do, but I feel my freedoms being reduced on a day-to-day basis, and that isn't fair. But and having been around those people who have got it worse than me, it's like, can people not see this? And I think people can, but I also think people's agency to do something about it is limited, because they're having to watch out for their own safety. and their own feelings of safeness and comfort. And we're in a very individualized society as well, and we've been fed that for the last 45 years. So there's I can feel myself kind of going, this is the stuff which I'd love to see change. I'd love to see a government turn around and go, "Yeah, actually, we do understand the people who we're serving instead of not understanding them but pretending to." It's it's fascinating to watch. And I find myself getting so caught up in it that I go round and round and round. And I'm like, I don't know how to get out of this apart from just to go, no, I'm going back to watching series 4 of The Witcher. I'm just going to shut myself down and keep myself away from it. But it's fascinating. Yeah.
So if you had to finish this sentence, Dave, what would it be? Somebody should really do something about.
Oh, somebody should really do something about mental health. And I know that's a very big open one. And the reason I've gone for that one is I'm currently reading through I think it's the men's mental health strategy, which the government have just released. And it's really nice that it's there. But for me, there's some glaring gaps. It comes very much down to the individual, and we're going to empower the individual to have the tools to do. Instead of we're actually going to look at the whole of society, and we're going to change society so that society has the space to allow people to have great mental health. It comes back to the individual. So for me, it's always about mental health.
And linking that with you wanting a better relationship with emotions and your values, what is it that you're going to do about that?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. That's putting me on the spot. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing at the moment, which is speaking about it. And I have a phrase. So when I did my TEDx early this year on men's mental health and mindfulness, I I had actually retired my How to Be a Happy Human keynote. I was focusing more on the speaking, and then somebody said to me, "Can you come and do that keynote for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay then." Very reluctantly, because I thought I'd move towards more of the speaking and stuff instead. And then when the TEDx came out, it was like, "No, there's still more work to do here." And I say quite often to friends of mine who are men's mental health speakers, I say I'm not a men's mental health speaker. They go into all of the detail around testosterone and androgens and all this kind of big words which I can't even pronounce properly. And here I am as a bloke who lived with anger for very many years and did some stuff to work with it. I don't feel qualified to do it. However, I know that that's not necessarily true, that there's still some value in me speaking about it. And every time I've shared about my experience, I always worry that people are going to think it's self-indulgent. Well, you're just talking about that stuff again. You're looking for a bit of validation. But genuinely, people come to me and say, "Thank you for sharing that because it makes a difference." So there's a call there for me to talk more about the stuff that I talk about.
Could it be that the validation is in the people coming up afterwards as opposed to the actual story you're telling?
That always feels nice. That always feels nice because and also being able to accept that. The number of times people go up and go, "Thank you for that, thank you for sharing that." Oh, it's like when people compliment you on clothing or hair. It's always just something I found in the back of the wardrobe, or this is just what my hair was like this morning. And for those people who are not watching this because it's on sound, I have no hair. But it is. I've had to work very hard to accept the compliment. For me, compliments quite often feel a bit like playing baseball, that someone bowls this fastball at you and you just knock it out of the park. And sometimes I just have to catch it and hold it. So that's been part of my role has been and development has been to believe that stuff. Because I'm very good. I'm very good at telling myself that, oh, it's not that good, or there's a lot of imposter stuff which plays around there, and self belief and self doubt. So when people come up to you and say, "Thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you for talking about that. Thank you for being so open about it." I hope, and but this is a deep hope, that there are people out there who go, now I feel safe enough to go and share what I'm going through. Because you have to have that level of vulnerability to go first. And it took me the best part of, was it 2018 I first spoke about anger. So it took me the best part of 45 years to actually get out my own way and stand up and say, this was my experience.
And Dave, do you give other people compliments?
As often as I possibly can. Yeah. I know. Oh, you and your coachy question. But yes, I do. I do. And I know there are people in my life who I don't give compliments to enough, and they're the people who tend to be close to me. But I do the best I can to say to people, that is brilliant. Well done, great job, thank you. And one of the things which I have done, and this is very almost a very performative thing on LinkedIn, is I was struggling a bit at the back end of 2022 with a ruptured Achilles and wondering what the direction of my business was going and what I was going to do with marketing. And I decided I was going to get my recommendations I was given to people on LinkedIn up to 100, which meant that I had to go out there and had to think what difference have people made to me and tell them. And that's a reminder to me that I need to do more of that.
Love that. Going back to one of the key people, I believe has been instrumental in purpose and meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Mm.
You mentioned about the stimulus and response and the gap between. What is your understanding of purpose and in your life and business?
I'm still trying to work mine out. I'm still trying to work my purpose out. And interestingly, in the How to Be a Happy Human stuff, one of the three areas I talk about authenticity, I talk about choice, and I talk about purpose. It's having that. It's having that attachment to something which, even on those mornings where I wake up and go, I don't want to do this, I still show up. I struggle to articulate mine, and I don't know whether that's something which I will continue. It will, whether that will be the thread through my life which I can never really put words to. But there's certainly, for me, if I attach it back to my values, there's always been work, particularly in the care work. It's always been about helping other people to be in a better physical condition, whether that is the nursing home work I did back in the mid 90s, or whether that's the A&E work I did in the early 2000s, where it was taking people who were not in a great space and putting them back together and taking them to somewhere else where they were going to be, they were in a better space when they left. Or whether the coaching work I do now, which is helping people who potentially are where I've been, and showing and supporting them. I don't know how to articulate it, and I don't know if there's one word I could go, this is what it is. But there's definitely a support in there, but not a support as in I'm just going to hold you up. There's almost like there's a walk in the path with people, because I'm still going through all of this stuff myself. I wake up some mornings and go, oh, I thought I'd sorted that out. Why is that still there? And I'm just looking at it from a different place. But definitely there is an element of purpose about helping other people and serving other people. And whatever I do, whatever jobs I've done, whatever businesses I've started, there's always been an element of wanting people to feel better and wanting people to feel seen. And I'm just thinking, we've got a supermarket, 150 yards from us. I always like it when I get the chance to speak to a cashier, because they're the people who are invisible. And it's like the sound engineers and the sound people at conferences. I tell you that the guy who I was working with on Thursday when I got there is Douglas. And I know that Douglas has been involved in the music industry, and I talked to him, and he told me how he got into the work he does, because he'd worked on his own, and then he wants to be around people. It's the seeing of people who don't normally get seen. Yeah, that's an interesting one. God, why is it in these conversations we always uncover stuff? Every time I talk to you, there's something happens, which is brilliant. That's not a complaint, by the way. It's an observation.
I love it. I love it. What was it that you felt was interesting there?
Just you have this laser. I mean, when we spoke on the phone a couple of months ago, you have this laser ability just to ask the question. And it's beautiful. It's surgically precise. It's like you're like a loving surgeon. There you go, a loving surgeon. How's that? But just that. Again, it's the invitation. It's the invitation for me to think about purpose. And one of the interesting things about talking about happiness is there's times where I'm not happy. And I feel guilty about that. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm talking about happiness. Surely I should be happy all the time. And I know that's just not the case. But the purpose thing is definitely something which I've been thinking about. But Yeah, that's seeing people who aren't normally seen. That helping people to move up a little bit in society, the world's estimation, whatever it is, and knowing that in my privileged position with all of the all of the tick box characteristics that I've got, which open doors, it's like, well, who else can I bring through those doors as well? Hmm.
I wonder whether there's a fourth F to add to your three core values, Dave.
Oh,
Well, you've mentioned fun, freedom, and fairness being the core three, but there has been another one that has been instrumental throughout. And where you were just talking about the support and the walk in the path, but also about the difference between structure and framework, and
oh.
framework being so key to everything that you were just talking about.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm glad it's an F because it would be really annoying if it was something else.
It's the flexibility of that, of what the framework offers. And you were talking about the felt, what it allows people to feel. You know, they're seen, heard, and validated, that, but it's what they're feeling is what's important to you.
And it's really interesting that it took me up until a couple of years ago to realize that everything I do now is connected to everything that I've ever done. And it may just be that sometimes I'm a bit dim and I don't see those connections. And when they hit me, it's like, oh, that's what it is that everything I did as an A&E nurse was you learn as much as you can about all the things that you might see, so that in the moment you've got all of these things to draw on. And I do the same in my speaking. Yes, I do comedy and improv and clowning, and I will find any opportunity to speak in a different style because I want that experience, because then it means that you can apply it in that moment. You can go off piste. You can have some fun. You can be flexible. You can have the freedom. You can use the frameworks, and you get the chance to be fair to people. And I know that I know that that can be a little bit frustrating for others, particularly if they're very structure based. That suddenly Dave just turns around and goes, "I've had an idea. Should we do something?" And that I like that. I like that idea of bringing a framework into the way I approach life.
In terms of, is it framework or is it feeling? Because mentioned earlier about you want to explore more on the emotions. You want to
Mm.
understand to have a better relationship with emotions and what you're feeling. What does having a better relationship with emotions give you?
I I've as a kid I was in hospital quite early on, about the age of 4, and having spina bifida and a club foot at birth meant that I didn't physically develop in the same way as other kids around me. They were walking earlier, they were off running and doing stuff, and I didn't. So for me, conversation was the way I suppose I developed. It's almost like the intellectual stuff. And my mom still talks to me about a story where she said to me one day, she goes, "You're not walking yet, are you? I think we might need to take you to the doctors." And I looked at her and said, "Yes, I think you probably should." We just had this very kind of lucid adult conversation. So I, and I know when I did clowning a year ago, one of the things which came out from that was how much I don't trust my body. And for me, body is very integral to feeling. And I say to people around me that one of the things I'm always trying to do is I'm always trying to feel more. I'm always trying to find the things which help me to feel something and bring me back into my body. And I do really struggle with that, because going into my head's a very safe place to be. I can just withdraw into my head and I can think things through, and it's okay. But to actually feel something, there's definitely, and it's interesting with the framework structure debate, there's definitely a feeling that when I start to feel things, I'm not in control. And if I think back to anger and all those years of expressing my feelings to the world with anger, there's still a bit of me where I go, I'm not going to go and revisit anger because I'm scared of where it might go. So there's still definitely a fear of emotion in there. And I tend to do a dichotomous kind of thing where it's like I'm either hiding away and not doing anything, or I'm just literally going, let's go and cause chaos. There's not much in the middle, and I have to learn to play with that grey area in the middle. But the last 4 or 5 years, certainly since separation, has been exploring those things which allow me to feel something. And it's things like films, it's things like, live music and music. It's going to Shakespeare, which I don't understand a word of what the buggers are saying, but I feel something. And the work I do around speaking, and the work I do with speakers, where I look at what they're speaking about, and I can draw something out of it because I can see it, and then I get that wonderful feeling of we just created something new. All of those things which are, where I feel something, and that for me feels like part of a lifetime's work. Is, well, how can I feel something and not feel like I'm about to be out of control? And again, I know that there's different sides to this. Is actually, well, maybe feeling something and being out of control is a good thing, but there's still an element of me where I'm going, oh, I need to hold on to this. I need to be very careful with this, and certainly anger is a big part of that.
Well, all emotions are good. There's no bad ones. They all are there to help you to process, to understand what it is in that moment that has happened. But then you do get to choose thereafter. You don't have to stay with that.
Yeah, and this is the life's work, and this is where those moments where I go, hang on, I speak about this stuff, I should have all this sorted, and then I realise that actually the message is not, I have all this sorted. The message is, I have some things which I think can help, and I'm still working through this stuff myself.
Yeah,
That's the authenticity.
that's exactly that. That is that intentional authenticity coming to surface again. So moving away from being just a head on a stick and connecting with the whole body and knowing that the whole body is there to serve and to provide you with a complete feeling, because all parts of the body are there to give you the different stimulus, different information to piece it all together. What is it that you're going to do next, Dave?
Oh, see, that's the big question, because the bit of me which doesn't like the future goes, I don't know, I'm gonna have a cup of tea. That would be the nice thing to have. It's for me, it's about experiments. There's things for me to continue to try. There's things for me to continue to experience. There's there's still so much to do in terms of understanding what it is for me to be happy, and then sharing that. There's so many elements in it. But one of the big things is it's about reconnection back to my body. Definitely. I mean, I go to the gym most days if I can. I I know today, we're in November as we record this, that it's quite cold out, but I know there's a point where I need to be outside and I need to be moving around, because without that, I don't feel complete. So many things. So for me, the stuff moving forward is it's about the reconnection back to my body. That's the big stuff, and also that scares me as well. But I know that every time I do it, there's always something which comes out of it which is beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. Forward, another F. Big, good one.
Oh, do you realize that you could take all of my values and it's like someone opening a fizzy bottle, be like, that'd be it.
Well, funny you mentioned that because one of mine is effervescence, which is that fizziness. So yeah.
I did one at one point. Maverick was one of the ones I did play with as a value, because it was, here's this thing which everyone's saying we should do in this particular way, and I'm going, can we break it, and then actually breaking it, but Maverick isn't an F. There must be an F in there.
Well, I think actually Maverick is the way, your route to freedom. It's your way that you actually adopt that behavior to create the freedom you need.
It's almost, one of my coaches said to me years ago. They said that when things get steady, you create chaos, and it's sometimes I just do that. That's that big end of the dichotomous scale, is that one day I'm doing nothing. I'm just very very chilled and calm, and the next day, "Oh, here's a grenade. Let's throw it in the room and see what happens. Oh dear, everything's broken. What do we do now?"
Well, what do we do now? We ask you to share how could people reach out and connect with you?
So I have a website which is work in progress, which is www.davethecoach.co.uk. Most of the time I spend on LinkedIn. That is my haunt. I currently post there every day. And please come and follow me there. I am on Instagram, but we don't talk about Instagram because I don't understand it. That's for the kids. But LinkedIn and website is probably the two places to come and find me.
Brilliant. Well, both those links are in the show notes. Dave, thank you so much for sharing your focus on why. It has been a beautiful conversation, and one which I'm sure will evoke a lot of reflection with action to ensue for you, which is always my focus in terms of what I want people to do, is to take away what they've heard and then apply it to their own life. So thank you for sharing that. Have you got some final words, please?
Well, firstly, to say thank you for the invitation, and it has been a delightful conversation. Final words. Final words are that I don't think there are ever any final words, because there's always stuff to do, and there's always stuff to find out. And this is a message for me as much as anything else, is that moment you think you know everything is the moment where something normally comes up and bites you on the bum, and you go, okay, there's still more work to do. And I know that my happiness work and the stuff I talk around happiness will look very different in 12 months time, and then 2 years time, and 3 years time, and to be open to that.
That's a wrap for today, but the journey doesn't end here. Share your takeaways, leave a review, or post your insights. Your voice helps others discover the value of these stories. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for ways to work with me. Get a copy of my book, or to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter packed with clarity and inspiration. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.